right. I'm going to be demonstrating the succulent painting here. And I'm going to be using this small sketchbook here. And this is the image that I'm going to be using. It's actually hard to see. See if I can adjust the darkness or lightness on there. Probably not. Okay. It's easier for you to see it without being blown out this direction, but I know that it's not appropriate view because of the light. But this is the image I'm going to be using. Okay. And I will also upload this image onto Canvas for you to use. Anything like this, what I'm looking for is basically a small succulent or small succulents. And in my classes, I want to stress to you that I ask that you use some design sensibility, meaning that you get to choose how you arrange your work on the page. And so even though this is my photo reference, I am not going to draw this exactly as it looks on this photo onto here. I'm going to choose the succulents that I want to use and draw them here. Now, the requirement of this is to paint 2 to 3. And so for this demonstration, I'm only going to paint 2 just because of the interest of time to keep it quick.
Okay, when you say 2 or 3, you're talking about 2 or 3 pots with succulents or one pot with 2 or 3 succulents in it.
I want 2 objects at least.
Okay.
So at least 2 pots.
Okay.
This one it looks like it has 2 succulents in it. What I really want is just 2 pots.
Okay.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think I'm going to do these 2 here. All righty. So I'm going to scooch this aside and move all of this stuff aside. And I'm going to draw this very, very quickly. Okay, where's my pencil? Here it is.
Like the fingernails, Larissa.
Thanks, I just got them done. My daughter is graduating from high school on Thursday, and today was the only day that she could get her gel nails done. And so Mom, had to go take her this morning, which was fun. So thank you. They'll only be fresh and pretty like this for, what, 2-3 days? And then they'll start to chip. Okay, so I'm gonna, the idea behind this assignment is that there's contrast and there's unity. And then I'm using line, what was the other one? I can't remember. Color. So arranging this, this doesn't look like anything now. What I'm doing is I'm actually just kind of sketching out roughly where I think these should be before I even start doing any kind of contour drawing. Now, I think I don't have enough space down here, so I'm going to lower the bottom of my pots a little bit lower because I realize I don't have enough space up at the top. And I think I want the bottom or the front part of the pot there. And I know that it's going to roughly fit into this box. Roughly here, these pots are pretty much the same exact shape. They're just different in the way that they're glazed. I don't like this. And they don't have to be, like I said, it doesn't have to be exactly the same as the photo, but I am using this photo as inspiration, let's say. Okay. So when I sketch like this, you can see how rough it is. I am trying to kind of create the essence of it, being mindful of how much space it takes. This one still looks like it's a little bit thinner than that one, so I might make that a little bit bigger. This one here, let's see if I can bring this in a little bit more. You guys can see that. Okay. Okay, this says movement this way. One of these is a lot bigger than the other. It's kind of out to there. Okay. And all right, this looks really, really messy, does it not? I'm going to start refining it in just a minute. But what I'm trying to do is make sure that I have kind of the essence in terms of how much space it's taking up on my page. And I'm being mindful of not just the positive space here, but also the negative space. One of the first things I learned in my drawing classes, it was in high school, my freshman, it was probably the second day of art class. My instructor put stools. He stacked a bunch of stools. See, you can't see me. He stacked a bunch of stools on the table and he said, don't draw the stools, draw the space between the stools. We're like, what? What is he talking about? Well, that's the negative space. And so when you actually focus on the negative space, like if I say, don't draw this pot, draw the white space between the pot, you're actually looking at the edge of the form in a different way. And that is a unique way to approach observational drawing. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna draw the white space around that. I'm gonna notice how this curves here. Okay, and because this is a pot and it's most likely symmetrical, whatever I do on one side, I can pretty much just assume that it's gonna be the same on the other. To make sure that it's symmetrical, I'm just gonna go ahead and draw a line, an axis line through the center. I think that looks like the center. Looks like it to me mostly. And now I can look at not just this, I can also look at this. So I'm looking at this and I'm looking at this to mirror and see that I'm making this consistent. Okay, that looks good. This spot is different than this one because it has a little cute little nubby feet on the bottom. So whatever I put on one side, I'm going to kind of put on the same on the other side. There. Okay, so that's pretty much the pot, the bottom. And now what I'm going to do is start to do the succulent. Um, this one's kind of bigger. This one is kind of coming out here. You know what, before I do that, I actually want to do the thickness around the rim because I realize that if I draw this succulent all the way where I think it should be, I'm not going to be getting it quite right. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my kneaded eraser. And what I like to do is I like to actually roll my kneaded eraser like it's a rolling pin. Okay. And then it gets really flat like this. And then what I do is I roll it across my paper and you'll notice that it just lifts up the graphite a little bit. So my graphite, my pencil lines are still there, but they're faint. Okay. And that just cleans it up a little bit for me. And it's rather than using a friction eraser where you are obliterating the line, and I will use that friction eraser here for the center line where I want that line to be gone completely. I use the kneaded eraser in places where I still want that line, but I just want it to be a little bit faint. Drawing the interior of the pot is an ellipse. Just lift up on that. Like I said, you do not have to draw these all out completely. If you want to just go ahead and trace your image onto watercolor paper, that is totally fine. Okay. When you do, though, when you do trace that, you have to kind of understand what are you tracing. You're tracing the lines, but there's going to be some things that you want to look for when you're tracing. And you're actually tracing the color shapes. Because when we paint in watercolor, we're basically painting that paint of within shapes. And by dividing or designating one shape from another, you're saying this is one area that I'm going to paint only with this color, with this particular color. And that's kind of what watercolor is about, is just deciding what area you're going to paint, what shape you're going to paint with what color. And so if you were to be tracing this particular image, you would be tracing obviously these leaves. That's pretty simple enough to know. And I think these are a lot higher than I have room for, so I'm just going to stunt these a little bit because I didn't give myself enough space up there. I'll be a little bit shorter. That's okay. Yeah, over here, there seems to be a little leaf right here. I'm going to look at, to get the angle of this right, I'm going to draw the white space here, this little V. I'm looking at the V shape here. If I just look at the V shape and the angle of that, it looks kind of like that. So that will kind of, I don't know if it's that's in the right place or not, but it probably isn't. But remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. You're using this as inspiration. So the trick on this particular succulent is going to be the variation of the darks and the lights in there. And so I think for this particular succulent, I will approach this one with my carefully rendered painting method. And this one lends itself more to being expressive. Now, when you do your assignment, I want you to choose to do either both of them loose and expressive, or both of them carefully rendered. For only this demonstration, I'm going to be doing both so you can see the difference. But I don't want yours to look like mine in that one is one style and one is the other style, because that would go against the unity of your work. Okay. So there, I think that looks okay. And then what I want to do also, this is what I was talking about in terms of tracing. What you would trace are the segments of color or wherever there is a highlight. So see that there is a highlight right here. This. I want to make sure that I get that in there, because when you're painting in watercolor and you have lights, you want to reserve those areas of light. Reserve the white on your paper to create that highlight. So if I don't mark that out, I might just paint over it and I won't be able to get that white highlight back. This is basically the reflection of a window, light coming through, or maybe a light source side, and there is this kind of green. There's a little bit of a blue here, and there's all kinds of color variation up in there that's happening that I'm not going to worry about. Okay, so this is going to be my carefully rendered one. Because I want this to be carefully rendered, I'm going to go ahead and use, checking the time, I'm going to go ahead and use my eraser and knock back the graphite here, because I have a lot of sketchy stuff back there that I don't want. And now that I've done that, I can see the lines that I've drawn a little bit better, but I want to emphasize them a little bit more. And remember that this assignment is requiring that you're using line. So once I've sketched this in, I want to see the line work, so I can actually come in here and make these lines really, really dark. And I think I will do that with this one. I'll make this one I am choosing to use dark pencil lines. So I'm going to go ahead and emphasize this. Whereas if I was doing another style, I might only want these pencil lines to be just dark enough so that I could see where I'm painting, but I don't want the pencil line to show. However, in this assignment, I'm asking that I see line work. And your line work, it doesn't actually have to be clean. If you want your line work to be sketchy, that's okay too. That is line. I think for this one, I'm choosing to use more precise, cleaned up line. I want to add, this just seems a little off balance, so I'm just going to add one in here because I know that I didn't draw that quite right. And that's okay. Okay, and then I'm going to emphasize this. I know I haven't even begun to paint yet. And looking at that, looks like it could be a little bit more wider on the side. Okay, and there's my line work. This is gonna be my carefully rendered note. Now, this one here, this one's kind of crazy. All of these little segments in here are gonna be really fun to paint, but I need to make sure that I get them just right. So here I go. Again, the same thing with the pot. I like using mechanical pencil because it stays really sharp, but then you have to make sure you have enough lead. And I will say, as an artist who travels, one of the first things that I do when I travel and I know that I'm going to be sketching is I make sure that I bring my mechanical pencil and I make sure I have enough lead for my mechanical pencil. It's kind of silly, but that's what I do. And I think that that's what makes me special. One time I was on vacation and I made the horrible mistake of leaving my pencil pouch at the airport. I don't know. I think I got on the airplane and I must have left it underneath the chair where I was sitting at. And when I arrived at my destination, the was it somebody I had gotten a call saying that somebody left. Yeah, there was a red pencil pouch and my name was on it, and I was really sad that whole trip. But I got it back. Okay. So now there is a lip on the bottom. There's this really beautiful glaze, and of course, that doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to have that feeling of that glaze. I'm gonna do the lip. And I wanna make sure, another thing that I want you guys to do, sorry, ladies to do, is to make sure that when you are drawing anything like a pot, if it has a thickness like the ceramic pot, that you are really focusing on getting that thickness in here because that area here has a lot of detail. It's you have to be really careful with it, but you see how there's a highlight in here and then there's slight dark area, it gets a little orangey in there. There's a lot of variation in the light and the highlights that helps to show and define the thickness of that. And not only the thickness, but the lip, the curvature of it. Okay. So there's a lot of information that's there that you will want to capture in your painting. If you can capture it in your painting, that's going to help with creating that sense of depth or form. Okay. Now, and because I am wanting to get this done kind of quick, um, I'm going to, this succulent is really interesting. It kind of looks like an artichoke. Oh, it kind of looks like little squished grapes, actually. It's little segments. And then it comes over, there's this big leaf here. And I'm probably not going to draw this quite right, but I might even simplify this. But what I want to do is I want to make just do the best that I can. And another thing that I want you to remember is that no one is going to be looking at the photo reference when they look at your artwork. They're only going to be looking at your artwork. So it's up to you to show the viewer what you want them to see. Everything that you draw is your decision on what you want the viewer to see. Now, in this instance, this probably would be really good to just trace this. And because this is too big, I don't have enough space for it. I mean, I'm gonna do that. This one has a little bit of something funny over here. And then a little thing there. Okay. Now, this one is going to be my loose and expressive one. So carefully rendered. I don't want to draw it on here. I'm actually going to put it on a separate piece of paper just so we know. Okay. Carefully rendered. Loose and expressive. All right. Okay, now that I've drawn this, I can finally begin painting. I'm going to put this aside and I'm going to go ahead and get my palette out, and remember the parameters of this assignment are you're going to use only blues and yellows and one red. So I'm going to keep this here so that I can use this to test my colors out. I'll put this here. Okay. All right, I've got my paper towels here. I'm going to go ahead and just spray all of my paints. Oh, look at that. Okay. I already have my palette is kind of already mixed up here with a lot of paints. I'm just going to go ahead and keep using it too. Okay. I'm going to start off with the bold and expressive one first, because that's probably the quickest one to do. Okay. Also, I forgot that I wanted this one to be really have bold ink, but I think I'm going to choose to maybe add the ink after. Yes, that's my choice. So let me try and do that. So, okay. Now you can kind of see that now. Okay.
Are
Green.
you recording?
Yes, I am recording. Thank you for double checking. Okay, so I'm gonna start off with generally speaking, whenever I paint in watercolor, I want to start off with my lightest colors first, because I want to lay that down, and I want to make sure I'm reserving any white areas. Let's see, and I think there's a little bit of a white area back there, but not a whole lot here. Maybe just a tiny bit on the lip here. So I'll just get that, and that's going to be consistent with that highlight there. So that'll make those things feel like they're in the same space. All right. This little area of green right here, it's very, very desaturated. I'm going to kind of play around with my coloring in here and see what I want. Because that's so white and it's green, but it's not totally bright, I'm going to use a lot of water. Now, is that a warm or a cool green? I don't know. Let's see. This is like a phthalo blue, I think, and this blue is really, really bright. You can see. I don't know if I want to use that blue. Probably, I don't know. I mean, I could. Let's try it. Sure, let's try it. So let's try this blue, and I'm gonna add some. Let's add some cool yellow. I'm running out of paint here. I actually have to get some more. So that green, actually, that's not bad. That's actually pretty good, but it's too green. It's too strong. It's too saturated. So what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of red. So now I have to choose which red I'm going to use as the one and only red that I'm going to use to cut down the intensity of the green. And I think I'll just go with this one here. No, I'm gonna go with alizarin crimson. I'm gonna just see what that would. And you know what, actually, what you can do is you don't have to do what I'm doing, which is just kind of running by the seat of your pants. You can actually test out which red works best. But for now, for this demonstration, I don't know. I'm just gonna go with my gut here and go with this red here. Because it's more of a cool red. So if I use that red and put that, yeah, that's actually that's making it. That's really nice. It actually not quite the green that I want. But that is a green that I can use. So that's good to know. It's a little dark. What I want to do is I want it to be a little bit lighter. So I want to use a little bit more yellow. I'm going to add some more fancy yellow. This is my cool yellow to this. And I actually want to clean this palette. I'm going to clean this out to make sure that I have nice, fresh yellow. I cleaned it out. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in there. Yeah. And I'm gonna add that to that blue. And I know there's other colors on my palette still that are mixing up with that. Now that is a really bright green. That is way too strong of a green. I want that to be more yellow. And add more yellow to that. That's better, but that's still too strong of a green. So what I'm gonna do is I want it more desaturated like this. So I'm gonna have to add a little bit of red to it. I'm gonna just take some of this paint like that, clean off my brush, get a little bit, just a touch of that, just a touch, and add that in there and see what happens. That's good. Okay. And that's nice. That's not quite the green that I want. I want it a little bit lighter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a lot of water to it. And it's a little bit lighter. Okay, that'll work. That's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint this loose. So I'm going to also notice that there's a lot of white areas in here. I'm going to reserve those as best as I can. And I probably shouldn't paint with this big brush. I'm going to switch over to my 6 Kolinsky. And when I go in there, I'm going to paint and omit the paint around the edges. All right. There's a lot of volume of paint on this brush. You can see how it's kind of beating. You can really see how thick it is. And I'm okay with that. So I'm kind of leaving these little white areas around the top. Also remember that when you paint, the paint is going to dry lighter than what you put down. Okay. So that is a lot of paint. It is very juicy, very wet. What I'm noticing also is that this area down here is a lot less green than this area. So while this is wet, I actually want this to be more of this desaturated. So I'm actually going to come in here with this little bit of red. I know that's a lot of red. And touch some of this red in here. And you can see that that's already just darkening it up. And I can kind of come in here and even darken that up a little bit. Okay. I'm just going to hold this up so you guys can see that a little bit closer. So, and I want to be careful around the edges there. All right. Now, that's going to take a while to dry. I also brought my cute little hair dryer, but I don't want to use my hair dryer because right now it's going to blow all that stuff everywhere. So I'm going to move on to this. So this being this really nice red. Of course, because I said you have to only use one red and this has red, I get to use that alizarin crimson, which is probably a good idea, why I picked that one, because that I think would go really well. So I'm going to go right into the green that I was using before and see if that looks nice. Yeah, that really does. I really like that. But I could probably use a lot more red to get that color that I want, which is nice. Okay. That's nice. But before I just start painting the red, I want to come into this with a plan. What if I were to use a wash of a color on this whole area? What color might I use? I don't know if I could use the red as the wash and then leave areas and then paint the green,
Can you start with yellow?
or I could start with yellow. That's a great idea. Jerry, it's a great idea because yellow is the common denominator of all of these colors. So, because yellow is in the green, it's going to be in that red too. So I could start off with this yellow. And it's really more going to be green, but it's gonna, because I'm blending it in here. Now, if I wanted to, make this really pristine, I would be painting this in another pot. And I'm not. This is the loose and expressive part. So here I go. Alrighty. And that's really just green. Okay, that's fine. Let's see if I can kind of pull this where they're looking for a clean spot. I also want to think about those highlights in there. Okay, now the trick now is, what can I do while this is still wet? What can I do? I want to blend some of that green in these places. Okay. So I'm going to come in and get this green that has a little bit of this red in it. And I'm going to touch in some of these areas where it's really more green dark. And that's going to spread kind of fun way. Loosey goosey. There's a little bit of green in there, down there too. There's a lot more green down here. Okay. I think I want to just put another one over here just because it feels a little empty. Okay. All right. Now, what can I do? I want to see what happens when I add this red into it. And it might be a little crazy and wacky, but let's see what happens when I do it to one of them. Actually, that's really cool. I like that. So I'm gonna do that to some of them, maybe not all of them. On there, get a little bit more red. And here's the thing, I want these to be varied, so I don't want them all to be the same. I don't want to keep going to the same spot in my palette. I think I want to add some variations to that too. So I'm letting the paint do what it wants here. I am not in control. The only thing that I've controlled is where I've put the paint on my paper. It's all really, really wet. I know that because I'm painting this red into the green area, that the green that I've already painted is going to cut down the intensity on the red. But now I'm starting to lose some of that green, so I think I'm going to stop. I still have it in there. I see it. That's great. So I'm going to let that be. Okay. Because it's loose and expressive, and I see that it might be a little bit hard to see that because of the highlight. So I'm going to come in and You can see there's a lot of bleeding happening in here, but this is like the zen of watercolor painting is kind of letting it, seeing what happens when it does what it does. Okay. Let's get that a little bit higher. Okay. All right. Now, if I wanted to come in there with anything and kind of mess around with it, I could. Like if I wanted to refine any of these things, I've got this is a small brush. I'm going to take this 000 and I'm going to pick up some of this paint here and I'm just going to clean up the edge. I'm basically just moving the paint because it's very, very wet. I'm refining it a little bit more. Okay. That's very wet. This is all very wet. I got to let that dry. So I'm going to move on to this pot. Now remember what I said? Only green or only yellow and blue. How am I going to get that color? I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that particular color with yellow and blue, but remember I said I don't, this isn't about getting true color to the pot. I can make this pot, as long as I get the values right, I think that'll be okay. So I'm actually going to clean this palette here because I want to, I want to be able to control that a little bit better without these extra colors messing things up. Okay. So what I'm going after here now is I'm going to go after the value of this pot, meaning, oops, there we go. I'm going to go after the value of the pot, and it might be a little bit hard to see. There we go. Okay. Shadows on one side, light is around here. You can see that there's a highlight right here. The light is coming from this direction. Shadow side is here. So basically what I'm trying to do is just I want to create this feeling of this glaze here. This glaze is darker than this, and this shadow side is darker than this side. So, and then this bottom area is darker than this. So I'm going to use yellow and blue, but I'm probably use more yellow than blue and probably red. I'll use a lot more red to get, I don't know, we'll see. Because I still am using primaries. I'm using only yellows and blues and then red. So that is a primary. I can get an orange with yellow and red. With the yellows I'm using, and I might switch to actually a CAD yellow at this time. And then take that one alizarin crimson. Okay. CAD yellow. This is way too saturated, right? Because now this is like an orange. So how do we desaturate a color besides, how do we take the intensity out of any color? Is we can use the complementary color of it, and the complementary color of orange is blue. So I'm going to take, I can choose which blue will cut that down. I don't know if using a phthalo blue would cut that down in the way that I want, or if using an ultramarine blue. See, an ultramarine blue will cut that down the way I want. So I'm going to try both. I'm going to take some of this over here and take some ultramarine blue. And that is giving me this kind of grayish color here, which is not bad. And then I'm going to see what happens when I take the same thing and do with a phthalo blue. That's more of a brown. Okay. So I have some desaturated colors. Like this actually looks really yellow on the screen, but it's not quite that. Oh, all right. But it's kind of ceramic color. So Let's see what happens when I do this. Okay. I'm going to paint this area here. I'm going to paint lighter. I know it's not the right color and I don't care. I'm just trying to get the value right. And I know it's going to get darker over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually removing the paint from my brush and I'm going to lift up over here. Okay. So that's going to lighten it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little bit more paint. Actually, if I just go right in here, this pool, it's not going to do a whole lot because it's not getting too much darker. What I could do is I could add another color, maybe a little bit more. I'm going to have to add more paint, more pigment. So I'm adding all three, blue, red, and yellow, to get a darker color. And then I'm going to just drop that in there. Now it's really, really wet, so I'm doing something else. I'm also sucking up that paint because it's too wet. And as I suck up that paint, I'm actually going to go in there and add a little bit more pigment. So that it's darker. And because I want this to be loose and expressive, I'm okay with that kind of thing happening down there. Now, that's okay too, but I think I want that to be a little bit more blue. So I'm going to add a little bit of blue there, and that's going to do some really fun things. It's going to spread. But that feels really organic to me. Kind of like that. I'm going to put that up in there too. Okay, so now I have the value getting darker on this side. That's kind of nice, but I want to do some of that up here. So I'm going to come back and get this lighter color up here, get that up at the top, go around that highlight. And the same thing that I did down here, I'm going to do up here. I'm going to add more of that color over here. Maybe just add a little bit more blue, yellow. I'm adding blue, yellow, and red. That's too much red. And I'm adding that in there, just touching that in there. So it's dark. Okay. And now I'm having the feeling of form. Okay. All this stuff is still really, really wet. So I would have to probably like walk away from it. Or I could just keep painting and let everything bleed into each other, which is kind of what's happening right now. That's also very expressive. I shouldn't have done that, but that's what I did. Okay. So because this is wet and that's all wet, I want all of that to dry before I do anything else to it. So for the interest of time, I'm going to move on to this one, which is going to be the carefully rendered one. And I'm not going to carefully render this whole thing. I'm just going to kind of show you the approach that I might take for doing the succulent. Okay. So carefully rendered, meaning I'm going to go slow and I'm going to use some glazing techniques. So let's see. Actually, it's 2:30. This would be a great time for a break. It'll be a great time for a break because then I can let my paint dry. You guys can take a little rest and then we'll come back and actually I can let this dry really good and then we'll continue. So let's take a 10-minute and then we'll continue on. Okay. I'll pause recording. All right, we're back. So this assignment, you are focusing on creating line and value in your paintings. And you are also working on incorporating contrast and unity. So who was it? Chris, did you say I could do one pot with 2 succulents and one pot with no succulent? Yes, that would be contrast.
Okay,
Unity would be like making sure that the pots are similar, perhaps, to create
Okay.
some, unity. So it's not completely contrasted.
okay.
Okay. All right. So this is done drying. I actually used my hair dryer for it. And I think I'm going to go back in there and do the next layer rather than starting on this one. We'll continue on with this one. So because this is the other things that you have the option for, remember, are to go loose and expressive or carefully rendered. I have found that my handwriting has just gotten worse as I've gotten older, and I think it's because I just don't care anymore. All right. So
Because you're an artist.
is it? But my handwriting used to be pristine. I think I'm evolving as a human being. I think that's what it is.
No, it's as long as you can read it.
What? Right. As long as
I found as long as I can read my own handwriting.
I can read it, then I'm okay. Yeah, it's true. I've never not been able to read my own handwriting. I think that's when I know I'm having a problem. Okay, so loose and expressive. Also value. You notice how this has this feeling of form because of the way that I put the wash in. I lifted up over here. I added more paint over here. So now it's radiating here. I had to let all this dry so I can come in here and get this second part. And I think I want to play around with that and getting this part in here. And I know it's kind of hard to see. This is kind of a blue, really pretty, but I don't think I'm going to be able to get, well, I don't know. I might be able to get that blue. And if I don't get that exact blue, I'm okay. I'm okay with not getting that exact blue, especially today. Just because of the time that I have. So, but remember, I said you could use any blues or yellows. I have blue here. I don't even know which blue this is. I like it. And I don't know that it's a Winsor Newton or anything because it's very gummy. It might be a student grade blue. I'm not quite sure where it came from, but it's on my palette. And it's also bubbling, so that's making me feel like it's not really the best kind of blue. So, but maybe oh, you know what? I have a turquoise in here. That's a really nice one. I'll maybe try. Yeah, that's good. And by the way, your turquoises, I suppose that counts as a blue green. I'm gonna try that. Yeah, I'm gonna try that and make sure that I have enough volume of the paint. And I also want to have another area or a little pocket that has a little bit more color or darker. Let's see this darker value. So I'm gonna have a lighter blue. Can't really see that, guys. Sorry. A lighter blue and a darker blue. So I'm adding this French ultramarine blue to this. I'm gonna add this turquoise to that and this. So now I have some variation. I have at least two values, and I might even make this a lighter value here by adding more water. There we go. And so when I test that out, you can see this is going to be like a light blue. Clean that brush. This one's going to be going to shift a little bit, and then this third one is a lot darker. So I have three variations there. Already pre-planned on my palette so that when I go in here and start painting that, I know what I already have values in mind. Okay. That's I know you cannot see it. It's really hard to see. I wonder if I can let me see if I can lower the brightness on there. Oh, actually that works. Oh, that's great. Now you guys can see it much better. Okay. It's lighter up at the top. I'm going to come in there with a lightness up here. I'm using my Kolinsky 6. Making sure this is all really, really wet because I want this to bleed into the next section. If I don't have enough paint here, this area where I stop painting, it's gonna be a hard edge. I don't want it to be a hard edge. And now I'm gonna paint the bottom part, like the darker area, I think. I'm leaving a space in between because I want there to be this like little area of light in between, I guess. I don't know. I have to make sure I have enough paint so that it's all wet when I merge the two. And I don't even know, I'm using the light and I'm using the darkest one. I didn't even use the middle one. I might actually now not even use that middle one. And now what I'll do is I'm going to use a clean brush, clean water, and I'm just going to go in between the two and mix them, kind of have them touch. You know what I'm doing? I'm just going in between. And you know, I'm adding a little bit more water, which is going to create this cauliflower effect, maybe. And also because the blue that I added in here is a stain color, it's not moving as much as I thought it would. But still kind of nice. And as it's still wet, I might even get some of this variation in here. Maybe I'll come in here with a little bit more blue and just touch some straight up pigment in some of these areas just to get even more variation, because I think that's pretty. And it's loose and expressive, and no one's gonna know what my painting with the photo look like. But also I want to see that it's darker on the side. This all can't be the same, so I actually have to go back and maybe add a little bit of some orange in there, and this will be interesting. I'm adding some of that orange from the ceramic color. I'm adding that just to this part over here. And maybe I'll add a little bit more of that in here. Coming in here and just adding it because it's wet and it's gonna spread. Now it's really wet and I'm gonna soak up some of this color here, because what happens when it's super, super wet and it dries faster than the area around it. If you have like a little pool of paint, then the area around it is going to dry. That pool is going to create kind of a cauliflower thing happening. So now I'm just going to come in here with more paint and darken that up. Add a little bit of this brown. I'm just playing. I know I want it to be darker, and it does feel darker, you know, and because it's all still wet, it's gonna merge there. Here's the thing, I don't want to touch this too much. If I touch it too much, I'm going to overwork it, and I don't want to overwork it at all. But I'm okay with that having that darkness of blue. I think I don't want this to be that blue, but because this is a stain, I can't really lift up on it too much. It's not going to come up as much as I thought it would. And that's okay. I'll pull some of this here. Yeah. All right. I think I'm happy with that. All right. So that looks kind of fun. I'm okay with that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the succulents, because the succulent is really where I need to be working. And there's a lot of areas that are dark in there. Okay. And I put all my light colors in. When we do watercolor, we're always working from light to dark. And we work from wash consistency to a little bit of a thicker consistency to even thicker. And that is what the method, I can't remember the name of the artist that coined it, is tea, milk, honey. And the tea consistency is the really thin consistency in the beginning. The milk consistency is like where it gets a little bit, the paint gets a little bit thicker. It's a little bit more opaque. And that's when you're putting your shadow shapes in. So I don't really have the shadow shapes in any of this here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the shadow shapes now. Bold loosely. I have all my white areas here. But now I want to start establishing the shadows. And I think I probably could do that with maybe just one glaze of color. And we'll see. What would be a good glaze of color to use? Probably a blue. And so I'm going to come back with this palette over here. Use this green and add more blue to it to get it to be more blue, I guess. And then maybe use that as my shadow color in all of those areas. Okay, green. I'll stick with French ultramarine because I know that's a pretty safe color. But because that's going to be so saturated and I don't want it to be too strong. Well, I don't know if I want it to be too strong or not. I'm going to add some of that red, alizarin crimson. And I might want to only add a little bit of the alizarin crimson so that it just stays a little bit green so that I can get this succulent and the shadow shapes in there, and then I'll switch it and make it more red when I get to the other succulent. Okay. All right, here we go. And I'm drying that off a bit, and I'm being really careful to leave these white spaces there and paint the shadow right up into those white spaces. Okay. So that feels like there's a little bit of depth. And if I wanted to soften that out, I'm going to dry my brush a little bit, maybe come in with more of this green, and then maybe see if I can kind of do like an in-between color. And it's really, really small, the area that I'm painting. But I'm trying to do like a transitory color in between. All right. There's some shadow there. It's not as defined as that is, but it's got the feeling of succulent. And I'm also losing out on a lot of that lightness in there. But it has succulent-ish feeling. So I'm okay with that. Now I'm going to go and work in the shadow shapes in there. And I'm going to add some more alizarin crimson to this. And that's going to get, because I'm using red with the blue, it's going to be more purple, which I really like. And I'm going to do pretty much the same thing that I did with that one. Go in there and get the darkest areas. I want to make sure that I don't have too much paint. So I'm going to just tap the excess paint off of there. Some of these, some of these shapes lost their definition because the colors merged together. So I think I'm going to utilize the shadow to define each of these little succulent leaves a little bit more. And the trick to this is just careful observation, is looking at where does this color exist? Where does this color or this value exist in this painting? Where's the only places that I'm seeing it come up? And I might not get it completely. But it's got a feel of it. And one thing that I want to do is I want to make sure those greens and reds that I painted earlier, I don't want to obliterate those. I really like those. So I want to make sure I'm just kind of showcasing that. Now I'm kind of doing like a reverse painting where I'm getting the shadow around the object. All right. It's not bad. Okay. And I think the last thing I want to do is just get the rim of this saucer, and it's going to bleed for sure because the stuff at the top I just painted, it's still wet, but I'm going to say I'm okay with that because it's going to lend to my expressiveness. So here we go. There's not as much water in this layer right here. It's a pretty dry brush, but and I'll get that lip over there, and maybe I'll come in just a little bit of color, a little dark area there, maybe just to hit a couple places there. Okay, so there's a loosey-goosey thing. The last pass I could do is the even deeper shadows in there, and that would be thicker because there's shadow shapes, but not completely the dark area. So I'll come in there and I'm going to make my paint really, really thick. I'm going to mix up alizarin crimson with some ultramarine blue, and then I'm going to add some yellow in there to make it really, really. I really want this to be more of a green, so I got to add more yellow, more blue. But I want it to be really, really dark. Maybe more blue. Okay, that's really, really nice and dark. Okay, that's almost too. No, that's fine. That'll be okay. Okay, so now I'm gonna take. I'm gonna take a small brush. This one here, and I'm gonna go in between. Get these little teeny tiny nookies and crannies. Even though I know this is a loose and expressive one, I want those dark shadows to kind of pop. And when I put the dark areas in, it's going to define those leaves even more. And everything that's light in there is going to feel even lighter because I'm creating contrast with adding those shadow shapes in there. And I could do that same thing in here in this one too, on the other succulent, and get even darker. See how much darker that is? There's some nooks and crannies in here that when I add that darker area, that honey paint, it's a darker value. Now that's really going to show me the occlusion areas where the light cannot get to. And I'm kind of looking at my thing here. A lot of it is under here. Okay, so because I'm adding that third kind of pass or that value to some of these places. It has a succulent feel to it. Some of these areas aren't as defined, but remember what I said is this is ink and value, color, ink, and line. So these areas that I have here where the pencil is, I'm going to draw over that with pen. And I want to do that right now. So I'm going to just mute my camera so that I can load. All right, now the ink part. Okay, so I'm going to come in with, which one should I use? This is the brush pen. I like that. Okay, here we go. Now, because I work in animation and I've studied or I've done actual cleanup animation. Cleanup animation is when you take a sketch that the animator drew and you turn it into a clean line art. And so what we often do in cleanup animation is we put the heavier weight of the line at the bottom of the form, and that heavier line weight has visual weight, and it makes things feel heavier on the bottom because of gravity. I'm going to make, you don't have to do this, I'm just telling you what I'm doing. I'm giving it a little bit more of a thicker line at the bottom. And now I'm going to come in here and outline the areas of the succulent that I drew. And because I left white in that area, there's a highlight there and it's defined. And that doesn't look so bad. And I don't have to outline everything. I can use line in a way, like I'm breaking up my line weight there to give it that feeling of, I don't know what that's the feeling of, but I'm just giving it some indication, but not too much. Okay, so here we go. And then I think I really actually want to look at this a little bit more to get those defined, because I don't know what I was doing. But I will trace the spaces or the shapes that I made here. And then maybe define some a little bit more clearer, yes. And oops, sorry, I'm not even drawing on camera. Making sure that I'm leaving that like little white area so that it feels like the light is hitting. And you can also play around with a thick or thin line. If you want it all to be thick, that's great. If you want it all to be thin, that's okay too. If you want to vary the line weight like I've done, that's fun too. Another thing that you can do is if you are doing loose and expressive, you can play around with adding extra marks that don't make any sense, maybe rhyme or reason around it just for fun. Now I'm using these cross-hatching kind of lines to create a sense of form. Yeah, alrighty. And that is my Lucy expressive one, okay? That only took me most of the time. So with this one, I know I'm not gonna be able to finish this within the time that we have, but I will get started on it, okay? Are there any questions before I begin that one? No. Great, okay. So this one's gonna be more refined. I'm gonna start with, I'm actually gonna brighten this up a bit more so that I can see it. Okay. Glazing. Again, the same rule is only yellows and blues and a little bit of red. I think this is going to be fun to do this because this is black, but I'm going to mix alizarin crimson with, oops, I don't know, with the green. It's going to get really, really dark. All right, I'm going to do a wash. Oops. I'm going to do a wash of yellow here. And because there are areas that are light, the highlight, I'm going to have to omit those. I'm going to have to omit those colors or those, the paint in those areas. And I'm going to paint everything yellow because it's green, which I'm going to add blues on top to create that mixture. And I think there's another one over here that I didn't get. All right, and there's some kind of green on this bottom part of the pot too. I think I can go over all of that with kind of a yellow. And then maybe blend colors in there later. Kind of a yellow right in here. So that's my overall wash. I'm not even going to worry about that part here, but this highlight here feels a little bluish to me, so I might come in there with like a light blue. Where's my paint? And that's going to be the lightest area, and this is all going to be really, really dark. Let's see here. There's a little bit of blue down there too. Okay, so that's one wash. It's almost dry. Okay, so I'm going to come in there and I'm going to start working and making some of these succulent leaves a little bit more defined. It's mostly yellow in here, but here's the thing. There are these little spots in here. If I wanted to keep that, one thing I might do is like mask that out. I don't want to mask this out. So I'm just going to try and I might actually do something like maybe try salt or something. You could try something that's going to create some texture. I don't even know if I have any salt. Do I have salt? Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna grab some salt from the table, kitchen table here. Oh, there's no salt there. There it is. And just see what happens. Just on one of them. You know, just to play around. It's not gonna be necessarily the exact same type of texture that I see there, but it might be interesting. I'll just try that on one. That's too dark. I want it to be a little bit lighter. We really have a salt shaker. Okay. By the way, this is an assignment. Paint a salt shaker. Okay, so that's creating some interesting texture. Okay. Oops, I should probably not get salt on the iPad. All right, I kind of like that, so I'm going to try it with the other ones too. We'll just keep going. Yep. Okay. And I'm going to try something now. I'm going to try adding a little bit of a darker color in some of these areas to see what happens there. And I'm just playing around, and this is probably too loose, but I'm going to be more careful with that. And that's actually kind of neat. It's doing the opposite effect. Instead of making the lighter spots, it's making darker spots, but I'm okay with that. Okay. So I'm gonna keep going and build these other. And then add more blue to that in there. I'm adding more blue from my palette into this space here. And I'm really playing. I'm really, really playing around with this. And for this, I'm going a little bit faster than I normally would in terms of developing the value, just because of the interest of time and getting this done a little bit quicker for you. And I'm kind of going one succulent leaf at a time. You might want to do that where you just paint one individual leaf at a time, or you might want to do like a assembly line where you do one whole step where you paint all the green and all like the leaves to a certain value and then do another pass over all of it. It's up to you. I'm just going to come on straight up blue right in here and get that. That's really, really dark and it's spreading in a really interesting way. So yeah, that's kind of cool. All right. I'm going to come back with this kind of lighter green here. And this might not, this is probably not even as rendered as you can go, I know. But I'm being a little bit more careful in terms of how I apply my paint. I'm still letting the paint do what it does, meaning I know that it's going to spread if I put wet color into an area where it's wet. So I'm letting that get darker and I'm not getting any texture in there. So I gotta add some, forgot to add my salt. Oh, that didn't do what I wanted it to do. All right, that's okay. And I'll come and get a little bit of a lighter green up at the top here. I have some cat hair. And it gets a little bit dark. This one is interesting because it gets darker at the top and then lighter at the bottom. And this one, I forgot about that one. That one's really dark back there. Some salt of that one too. Okay, so I'm getting some interesting textures. Wasn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be, but it's still okay. So I'll let that dry and then I'm going to come in here and get this dark part here. So in the last class, Jerry was talking about how she made this black. What was it? It was Viridian. Was it Viridian green and alizarin crimson? Or was it phthalo green? Can't remember which one it was. But I'm not going to use green because I don't.
I think it's phthalo and alizarin
Phthalo. Okay, thanks.
green.
Thanks. So I'm going to use blue and yellow to make. Actually, should I use? Let's try the phthalo blue. Phthalo blue. And then let's try the lemon yellow. Ooh, that's too much. Okay, and then I'm going to mix that with the red, the alizarin, and that's going to be like, ooh, that's really, really dark. That is nice. I like that. I'm going to add a little bit more phthalo to that. That's going to get it more blue. I don't want it too blue, so I want it to be more darker. I'm adding more alizarin crimson. That is really nice. All righty, I like that. Let's see how that works. Now, something I got to watch out for. There's a highlight over here, or not highlight, but like a reflection. That's basically a reflection of this pot over here, I believe. And it gets a little bit lighter over here. That's a reflection of that. So this is all black, but it's not all completely black. There's going to be a little bit of softness over here. There's going to be a little bit of softness around here because there is the bounce light from the floor or the tabletop surface. It's reflecting off that. And this is a reflective surface. It's shiny. We can see that because of that highlight there. All right, so here we go. I'm going to put this in there. And when I paint that in, I want this to be really dark. And really wet because I'm going to lift up on some of that area. And I think I'm going to do it now. I'm going to take another brush. And I'm going to lift up here. Okay, that's good. Now keep going. Lift up here. Keep going. I'm running out of paint. Gotta make sure I get this all in one pass. And that's not even dark enough, but I think I'll let it be. I could actually, because I'm doing this carefully rendered, I really need to get it darker. But I don't think I'm going to. Let's see what happens. Okay, gets a little bit darker down here. It's definitely darker over here. I'm gonna come and get some phthalo, just cause that in there, and make sure that's dark there. Mm. Mm. And then over here. And now I'm going to add more pigment. Into these areas that are still wet. Still wet. I'm not adding more water, just more pigment, more paint to get it a little bit darker. A little bit up in here. Okay, like in there. There you go. And I haven't even done the ground shadow yet, but I don't think I'm going to. Okay. Now some of that color is in some of these other places I can see. I can see adding this same color inside the pot. Kind of jumping the gun by taking my dark shadow color and adding it in some of these places. But I think that because I'm ready and I see it, I can kind of get those in there. And I'm building that value up in between. And I know that the salt is in there and the salt is doing some fun absorption. And a little bit darker top there. I don't want that to be a hard line, so I'm going to soften my brush, wet it, dry it, and then use that as kind of like a blending thing because I don't want that to be hard edge. And I'm going to take that and make that there. That's a little bit darker there too. Let's merge that so that feels all unified. Okay, there's a little bit more shadow on that side too. I'm going to come in there. And I don't want it to be a linear, so I'm going to dry my brush. I don't want it to be a linear shape, so I'm drying my brush and softening that edge out a little bit more. Okay. And there's a lot of really pretty blues in there, which I like blue-green, which I think is kind of like a turquoisey color. So I'm going to come in there with this turquoisey color. and make kind of a green with that. And that might be interesting to lay that in. And I know that it's going to bleed if I put it in here. So I'm going to let that, I'm going to do something intentionally. I'm going to try and do a cauliflower. Okay. And the cauliflower is when you put more water on a painted area than is already on there. And that what happens is the water is going to push the paint across the paper, across the painting, across the colored area. And either that or it's going to bleed. It's going to do some bleeding thing there. Or it's going to suck it up and it's going to go into the other area. So that's actually what it's doing. It's sucking it up and coming into the other area. That's okay. I'm going to add some blue. Just straight up blue over here. And then I'm going to add just the straight up blue into that area. Oh, that's kind of fun. And then there's like a more of a darker blue up here. That's too wet, so I'm gonna soften that. And I know that if I paint that right in there, it's gonna blend, and that's okay. Yeah, that didn't differentiate at all. So I'm gonna lighten that up area a little bit, remove that paint. And now there's a little bit more of a differentiation there. It's not quite the same color, but I'm okay with that. Okay, and just to make sure that I can end this on time, I'm gonna start off with the top part of that. And it's gonna bleed. It's gonna bleed. I don't want it to bleed, so I'm gonna actually let it dry. And let me just pause, blow dry it and come back. All right, dry. I'm gonna go and hit the top part of this. Oops. I have a brownish. Whoa! I don't want that to fall. I'm gonna hit some of this blue that I have over here and make that a little bit brown. And I want the value of this to have some of this highlighted area so that it feels like there's a shine. So I gotta try and get that carefully. And then there's some areas that are even darker. So to make it darker, I'm gonna add some blue to this brown. That's too blue. And I gotta get some red. And then tap that in some of these areas. I could probably define that a little bit more. Yeah. All right, and then what I'll do is I'm gonna come in and get like my dark color, this purple. I don't want it to be too purple. I want it to be a little bit more green. So I'm gonna go with the phthalo, and I'm gonna add some lemon yellow or the Hansa yellow in there. So now it's a really dark foresty green. And now since this is all dry, I can kind of come in there and really hit, just like I did before over here. I'm gonna hit some of these shadow areas. Even darker, I can. Yeah, a little dark area there. I think that. there's still salt in there, so it's still absorbing and doing some fun stuff. Okay, so this might seem a little bit still too loosey-goosey for you, but I did do my best to make it carefully rendered. I'm gonna get some of this here. Dry my brush off and then get a little bit of that wonky highlight thing there. And there's a little bit of like weird blue in there. Maybe a bit of this kind of blue in there. Okay. And yeah. Okay. Now I got two. I'm going to call that done. There's a little thing that's happening here that I didn't really plan. The salt there's some salt crystals that were there, and it pulled the color into my ceramic pot, which I wasn't really hoping for. So I'm going to see if I can. I might just ruin it, but I might just merge all of that, and that's okay. All right, so there. Now I've got one more carefully rendered with a pencil line. I could come in here and do like a really thin line on this one, or I could leave it pencil, but I think I'll just kind of, because I have some areas of highlight that I want to make sure I see. I'm going to go and use like a thin line. And when this is done drawing, I can come back and I can maybe see about erasing away some pencil line. I don't know if I would actually do that, but I might just try to use more of a energetic. Oh no, that's an energetic line wouldn't make this carefully rendered. Okay. But you can see that there's two styles.
Question.
Yeah.
I noticed you haven't done anything with shadows on the surface.
No, I haven't done that yet. I was going to wait till the end,
Okay, so you are planning on that. You're not going to just leave them graphic like that.
like floating. No, I
Okay.
want to do that first. Okay, so let's do that. How
All
much time we got? We got some time. Okay, so let's do the shadows. Okay, so now I think like I'm going to use a colorful shadow. I'm going to use this kind of color in here that I already used, but I want to test it and see what that looks like. You can kind of see that. I want maybe to be a little bit more purpley. So add a little bit more alizarin crimson, just because I want it to have a little bit more color, I guess. There, that has a little bit more of a purple feeling to it. And then I want it to be very light. So, okay. All right, here we go. I'm going to play with the shadow. Okay. Very carefully. I'm using a really big brush here. I should probably be careful with this. So I'm going to go against the edge, the bottom of this, and then paint this out. I don't want this to be a hard edge because it's going to soften out. So now I'm going to take another brush. I didn't need to use a big brush, actually. And now I'm going to just pull it with a wet. Okay. I can add more depth to that now that I've softened it out. Can add more right in there. And see what happens. And I'll do the same thing to this other one here. And then soften that. Okay. We got some ground shadows, folks. And if I wanted to be even more playful, I could come in there with some really strong bits of color, maybe a little bit more blue and red. I don't want as much water in there, so I'm just gonna, let's see. I think it would be nice to have a little bit of fun color in there. And the shadow. Yeah. That's the fun thing about watercolor, is the color. I like that part. Anyway. Okay. Look at that. I painted a whole thing in class. First time for everything. All right. And that concludes the demonstration.